Good evening, friends. Vanakkam. On behalf of Anna Nagar CP Study Circle, I am yours, Hemant Kumar, convener. Welcomes you all for this wonderful evening on very interesting topic on recent changes in audit as well as financial reporting. Before starting our session, as usual, let us have ICA motto. Give me a minute, son.
Yaesha sukteshu jagrati. Yaesha sukteshu jagrati. Kamam 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 kamursho. Nirvimanaha Tadeva shukram Tadeva shukra brahma Tadeva amritamuchyate Tasmin lokaha shitaha Sarve tadunatyati kaschan Etadvaita 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 Etadvaita.
Thanks to all. Friends, today we have a wonderful topic for this month-end seminar on CPE, recent changes in audit as well as the financial reporting. So the month of August is completed, September is started. Time for us for doing our corporate audits as well as our tax audit as non-corporate audits. So this is the time where we have to upgrade ourselves for the recent changes. Welcome, sir. And today we have two eminent personalities. First, I would like to introduce our own speaker and Vishnu having Dasavatar, like in our South India, we have a greatest speaker in any topic. If you say the learned speakers, Dr. C.A. Gopalakrishna Raju, sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
So like Kamala Hassan, you will be there always and every day alternatives we are seeing you. And needless to introduce, Gopalakrishna Raju, sir, served for SIRC for 3 terms, consecutive 3 terms before time, and he's our leader representative, and he is serving for the fraternity in day in day out, and we are seeing in different meetings every alternative for educating our members in different forums. Thank you very much, sir. For an effective speaker like Kamala Hassan, we required another star, Dr. C.S. Dhanapal, sir. Talavar is there for company secretary and pioneer in this particular topic. So we welcome you, sir, for this wonderful session. So for taking the next step, I request Dr. C.S. Dhanapal, sir, to take as a moderator as well as speaker and continue this meeting. And I request to take this more in-depth of educate our members. Without wasting further more time, I request C.S. Dhanapal, sir, take the moderator taking the responsibility and make our next couple of hours. Thank you very much. Over to Dhanapal, sir.
Unmute, please unmute.
Unmute.
Yeah, good evening, Hemant ji. And first of all, I would like to thank the opportunity given by Anna Nagar Study Circle, ASF ICA, and Dr. Gopalakrishna Raju. So I hope today it is going to be on audit and financial reporting. So I think it is going to combine both audit aspects as well as financial aspects, which we are going to hear out from our good friend Dr. Raju, who happened to be a triplet and hail from a CA family, bunch of CA in the family. So I think there won't be a good person better than him to deliberate particularly on this particular topic on audit and financial reporting. See, particularly this since the topic is more oriented towards audit and financial reporting. I think organizer Mr. Hemant Kumar, he felt it better to deal with some expert of audit and financial reporting, so that he will be in a better position to throw more light on that. Probably with my limited knowledge, I will try to share my views wherever I can supplement to the main speaker of this session. So, good evening, Dr. Gopal Krishna Raju.
Good evening.
So now going to the topic. Now, as you all aware that Schedule 3 recently got amended. Of course, Schedule 3 got amended, but given effect recently, and also CARO given effect recently, and there are so many changes are taking place in and around us, more particularly on auditing and financial aspects. So I thought better to start with to learn the subject, to understand the subject from basics of Schedule 3 and
Yes.
CARO and NDAs. So, Dr. Raju, we would like to understand from you the reason amendment to Schedule 3, from when it becomes effective, and from which financial year the corporate has to follow, the stakeholder has to follow. I request your deliberation on that point.
Well, so very good evening, friends. At the outset, let me thank Anna Nagar CP Study Circle of SIRC of ICAI for this wonderful opportunity. Thanking the convener CA Hemant Kumar as well as Deputy Convener CA Bashekar Mattapalli. I must compliment both of them for one reason, consecutively for the second year. So they are the pandemic convener and deputy convener. But despite the pandemic, I think more number of programs. I am sure all of you will agree with me. The kind of programs and the deliberations that they have taken through the past 1.5 years and more, it's quite fabulous. And especially we are able to witness, generally if it is a physical program, the number of participation as well as the kind of speakers will only have a local flavor. But I must definitely acknowledge and the kind of enthu at which Mr. Hemant Kumar and Bashekar under the we have a very able and senior professional, Mr. Bashekar, who has been guiding this study circle, and where we were able to see a variety of national speakers, and that has given a kind of niche for this Anna Nagar CP study circle. So Anna Nagar means in Chennai, it is a flamboyant location, and also this study circle also has reached that particular pinnacle. Coming to today's topic, this Indian accounting standard, we are aware that it is only applicable for certain companies, especially listed companies. And for other corporates and non-corporate entities, accounting standard is applicable. So I will call this as in a step-by-step manner, in a phased manner, for non or unlisted companies, for an unlisted corporate entities. Recently on 23rd of June 2021, accounting standard were made mandatory through introduction of this small and medium companies accounting standard applicability, and that too from the date that it was notified. So meaning for the year ended 31st March 2022, for small and medium companies also accounting standard is applicable, and for India's it is applicable. Now, if this is the front end, please go to the back end. On 24th of March 2021, Schedule 3 has been substantially, I will use the word called amended. Substantially, they have expanded. So it is not the existing Schedule 3 they have touched. They have they have actually brought out for Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3. Division 2 is for Ind-AS companies, Division 2 is for the non-Ind-AS companies, and Division 3 is for the NBFCs. So for everybody, the kind of disclosure through Schedule 3, we already know the accounting standard, the foundation of accounting standards, business first, accounting next, and disclosure is must. So apart from the accounting standard perspective disclosure, nowhere the accounting standard prescribes the format of accounts. They only give the content at which the information should be disclosed. So Schedule 3 supplements, or we can even say complements, the standard. And we must also appreciate one thing, that an year before, exactly before pandemic started on 24th of March 2020 onwards. But a month before, that is on 25th of February 2020, CARO 2020 amendment was brought out. And that was made applicable from 1/4/2020. But we know that the entire country was in lockdown 1.0. Now we are in lockdown 4.0, and we are slowly moving for lockdown 5.0 also. Maybe, we don't know. Here I need to appreciate one thing, that they have deferred the applicability of CARO 2020 to 1st April 2021. So here we need to appreciate one thing, that the Schedule 3 amendment is applicable for 21-22 financial year. The CARO 2020 is applicable for financial year 21-22. That means for the audit period 21-22. That means for the financial year 21-22, where the audit will be done post 22, where the audit report will be issued next year. CARO 2020 format is applicable. CARO, they have this time carefully, they have drafted in such a way that 2020 CARO has 21 points. And this 21 points are compared. So I'm not going to compare with the previous one. I'm only going to compare with the accounting standards requirement, disclosure requirement, Schedule 3 disclosure requirement, vis-a-vis the CARO requirement. So these are the comparatives we are going to do. Thank you very much for the wonderful opportunity and for giving you a primer on the connect between all these three. So over to Dhanapal for your next round of questions.
Dhanapal sir?
I think his connectivity is unstable. But nevertheless, until
for individuals, to get it clarified, for individuals, accounting standard applicability will be from 21-22 financial year, sir?
Very well, very good question. Okay, as far as non-corporate entities, I repeat the word non-corporate entities. We'll take it as corporates and non-corporates. For corporates, you have listed entities, and we have unlisted entities. And as far as unlisted entities are concerned, they have given a criteria where the small and medium companies, so they have classified the applicability of accounting standard from the year ended 31st March 2022. They have to comply with the 23rd June 2021 notification. Now, with respect to non-corporates, so what do you call it as individuals and partnership firms? As of today, we don't have a format of accounts for them. We don't have a codified format. But Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, through their accounting standards, they have classified enterprises. We call it as entities or enterprises into level 1, level 2, level 3 enterprises. So here, your individuals and partnership firms, they will be coming under the category of level 3 enterprises. So where the applicability has not been mandated under any law, but as a chartered accountant, when individual's balance sheet or a partnership firm's balance sheet or an NGO's balance sheet, in accounting standard, the term that is used is called entity. Even in Indian accounting standard, which is applicable for corporate, I mean listed entities, they never use a word called company. They only use a word called entity. So here entity refers to even individuals, partnership firms, non-profit organizations, everyone. So through the Institute of Chartered Accountants, as a member, when we certify, it is expected that whether we are in level 3 enterprise, yes, level 3 enterprise, there is a classification. Naturally, individuals and partnership firm, they don't fit into 1 and 2. They'll fit in level 3. So the applicability of level 3 with respect to certain accounting standards has been mandated through Institute of Chartered. So which is applicable as a member when I certify. So nowhere there is a mandate, but through Institute.
Good.
So we have got Mr. Dhanapal back. Mr. Dhanapal, you can carry on with your next question.
Sir, I request Dhanapal sir to continue the discussion. So Dhanapal sir.
Maybe he is not there, but nevertheless, I'll
Okay.
try to continue this discussion.
Continuation of the same thing. It's a welcoming decision that for non-corporate entities to bring a set of rules and regulations with the parameters like accounting standards to be introduced initially. So whether the format of like the Schedule 3 fixed format of presentation of the financial statements, where in the case of companies, more or less the same concept will come for the non-corporates also? Can we expect?
As far as format is concerned, standard has not given a codified format. So standard only prescribes what do you call it as identification of assets. So how do you do it? Second, measurement. Third, with respect to recognition of the particular transactions in books of accounts, and when de-recognition has to take place, and when a revaluation has to take place, and what are all the minimum disclosures that is required. So the standard only goes in these directions. So standard doesn't give you a codified format. No. You have to put everything in this dabba and left like this, right like this, or top and down. So that dabba format has not been given. But as a Companies Act, so when you are giving the reporting, so there through the Schedule 3, they are mandating this. Now that is why there was a requirement under Schedule 3. Now, if I am following Indian accounting standard, I am following accounting standard. So then what is my format? So Schedule 3 has mandated that if you are following Indian accounting standard, you follow Division 2 of Schedule 3. You are following the accounting standard, then Division 1 is applicable. No, you are following. So that means it is applicable only for corporates, Schedule 3. No, you are following. No, I am a NBFC. So if I am NBFC, for example, Sundaram Finance balance sheet, if you take it, their first asset will not be what do you call it as non-current asset. See, we generally will have non-current asset and current asset, but Sundaram Finance will have financial assets and non-financial assets. Their core is financial assets. So that is why Schedule 3 has been codified in this particular format. Nevertheless, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, they have brought out the format for non-corporate entities with respect to, that means even it can be for an NPO. For an NPO, what should be a format? They have given a guidance on that. And also for other than an NPO, that means for a profit-making entity, other than corporates. So individuals, partnership firms, association of persons who are profit-making entity, what can be an acceptable format? So this is what, as of today, we have a presentation. So as the year, maybe the days are not far off where the institute is also contemplating to bring out accounting standard in line with the SMC, in line with the recent 23rd June 2021 Ministry of Corporate Affairs, in line with the small and medium companies. There will be a what do you call the small and medium enterprises. Small and medium enterprises, so SMEs. So the applicability of accounting standard will come, so that any member of ICA, when they certify, they have to actually complete. Today, for example, especially the very small enterprises. So where the exemption will be given with respect to turnover criteria below a limit, capital criteria below a limit, and also with respect to the borrowing criteria below a limit, the exemption will be given. Okay, you present it in whichever format you want for your local consumption or for local requirement. But
Dr. Raju?
above this particular criteria, it will be required to follow the standard. So that is what been contemplated, and recently Institute has been very serious in bringing out a standard, because this is the requirement of regulators. I will mention that regulators here means
Dr.
Reserve Bank,
Raju?
especially banks.
Dr. Raju, can you hear me? Can you
Absolutely,
hear me?
clear and loud,
Sir,
Dhanapal.
Due to
Please go ahead.
network issue, my video is not coming out.
No problem. Please
Anyway,
go
I'll
ahead.
put my
You are
questions, you can
clear, you
answer.
are audible. You can put your questions without a video. We are able to see
That's
your
okay.
beautiful
See,
smiling.
in fact, I heard all your deliberations. Of course, you covered all the basics points, whatever related to MSME and all that. But the important nexus between the CARO 2020 and the Schedule 3 and IND-AS, if you can throw light to the members on the nexus between that and a fine difference and where is the connection between interlink between all the three, that would be more helpful to all the members.
Yeah. Now, I want to actually make one point very clear that especially the audit report format prescribed and the CARO, which has been prescribed in the past, 2016, and even before that. So 2016 is the latest CARO. I mean, the previous generation CARO, and the present CARO, which is applicable from this financial year, 21-22 onwards. So the new CARO reporting we'll only see from 22 year end onwards. Now, why this format has, why this particular change in CARO is actually envisaged? Because over a period of time, the disclosure requirement, Indian accounting standards also has been updated quite frequently. You can even appreciate that even in pandemic year 2020, there has been quite a substantial amendments has been brought out through the company's Indian accounting standard rules. Through that, they have substantially amended. So accounting standards, of course, standards should be fixed, but it will be updated and upgraded as the need of the business enhances and the regulators' perspective changes. So the need for regulators changes. So I just want to share with you point number one here. The point number one is we used to consider the ratios. I repeat, ratios not at the reporting level. That is, at an annual report level, ratios were not considered significant. It was only considered as a mundane number, or ratios, current ratio, or liquid ratio, or there are debt equity ratios. I must tell you that 11 is one number. You read left to right, right to left, top to bottom, the shadow image or the water image, 11 will look 11 only. Similarly, 11 ratios have been now brought out in Schedule 3. And in sync with that, CARO also has brought out that Schedule 3 has to list out 11 ratios. Now, CARO, auditor, what he will comment about ratios? Is the ratio computation correct? No. Very interesting point they have brought in CARO number, the serial number 19. In serial number 19, they have brought out a very important observation which auditor has to give based on the 11 ratios. So, from the company perspective, they will give 11 ratios. Now, what are those 11 ratios? Current ratio, debt equity ratio, DSCR, debt service coverage ratio, ROE, return on equity ratio, then ITR, inventory turnover ratio, then debtors turnover ratio, DTR, then CTR, creditors turnover ratio, then capital turnover ratio, net profit ratio, ROCE, return on capital employed, then ROI, return on investment. Friends, please understand that these ratios used to be voluntarily computed based on the annual reports, and it will be available for some research purpose or for comparison purpose. It mandatorily may not form part of the financial reporting. So now it has now formed part of the financial reporting, Schedule 3 from this year onwards. That means 21-22. We need to understand one more thing, that when you are giving this 11 ratios for year ended 22, year ended 22 will be the first time you will give the ratios. You have to give the comparative ratios also for 21. So that means for 31-3-2021 also, we need to calculate this 11 ratio, and we have to give this 11 ratio here. Now, one interesting point, in Schedule 3, companies have to explain the numerator and denominator. All of you will agree with me. What is it? Debt to equity ratio means, is it debt divided by equity or debt divided by debt plus equity? Both are correct. I repeat, both are correct, but interpretation differs. So the obligation is on the company to explain the numerator and denominator. And this is one place where I am also like you waiting for Institute of Chartered Accountants to come out with a guidance on Schedule 3, the new Schedule 3. This is point number 1. Maybe after the new election and all the new elected members, already work is going on. Maybe before the present council lays down, this particular guidance note will be issued, or the new council will actually do that. This is point number 1. Point number 2, this is in sync with your Caro. Now, Caro also has to explain, that means auditor in his report, he has to explain about this particular, he has to comment about this particular 11 ratios. You know what he will come, what he should comment about it? Very interesting. Based on this information, auditor has to say, well, whether the auditor is of the opinion that no material uncertainty exists as on the data audit report, that the company is capable of meeting its liability existing at the balance sheet date, as and when they fall due within a period of balance sheet date. Now, what is the meaning of this? So that means I have to give my opinion through Caro whether these numbers are within the acceptable the risk framework, or it is beyond. So meeting the liability existing at the balance sheet date. So whenever you go to a doctor, doctor will take your what do you call it as your heartbeat or your beats by catching your hands. So he will just find out, okay, what is your heartbeat? Okay, then he can guess, okay, you are actually having healthy body, or no, something is wrong. Similarly, by looking at this 11 ratios, the auditor has to comment. Very, very important. So this is first time they are connecting the what I call it as the financial report, your Ind AS presentation, Schedule 3 mandatory requirement. Based on the Schedule 3 disclosure, auditor has to give an opinion. First time you have got a connect like this. Not only that, so many other. So many aspects of Schedule 3 and the Caro today, especially after this amendment, you can see Schedule 3 will mandate an information, and the auditor has to give his comment on it. So the scope is now expanded. My view is the present 2021 auditor's report has a lot of responsibilities. Also, the auditee also has a lot of responsibilities to disclose. And I am sure the need for asking an enhancement in audit fee also will come in 21-22. So over to Dhanapal.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Raju, for your detailed explanation on ratios and the interlink between the Caro and Schedule 3 and Ind AS. Can you please throw light on the receivables? Recently, the Schedule 3 is throwing lot of requirements with respect to receivables and undisputed, disputed, and segregating period 6 months and 1 year. And now the Schedule 3 is really casting upon so many responsibilities to the corporate. Can you please deliberate in detail to make sure the members are really appreciating the changes in the Schedule 3?
Excellent.
Respect to
Excellent point. See, generally, what we used to have till last year, that is till 2021, receivables means MSME, non-MSME. Then below 6 months, above 6 months, matter over. But now it is not so. This below 6 months, above 6 months category. So we have to give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 column we have to give rather than giving 2 columns. So what do you mean by that 5 column? More than 3 years, if it is due, we have to give that. So more than 3 years means it is something very, whether it will come or not, we don't know. So that is 1 column. Less than 6 months. So less than 6 months, we are already giving. More than 6 months, we used to give. So now this more than 6 months is classified into 4 columns. So less than 6 months, good. More than 6 months, how it is classified into 4 columns? 6 to 1 year, 1 to 2 year, 2 to 3, and more than 3. This is the 4 column. So this is one exercise that has to be done. My suggestion, this when you are giving for the closing balance, you should also give for the opening balance. So therefore, that is why people have a dilemma. No, this is schedule 3 is applicable. New schedule 3 format is only applicable 31/3/22 only from 1st of April 21 to 31st March 22. Then when we have to give the comparatives, we need to do this exercise even for 31/3/21. Point number 1. Point number 2, very interesting. What they have classified is, so apart from generally in Ind AS 1, the presentation of financial statements in para number 78B, if you take, they say receivables you have to classify only in three types. What is that? Trade customers, so normal customers, related parties, and prepayments. So you have to only classify in these formats. So this is what the Indian accounting standards requirement. Now our schedule 3 requirement, I will say it is still much deeper apart from this. So we also have to give related party receivables, customer related receivable, and prepayments. Apart from that, disputed and undisputed. So receivables, disputed and undisputed, we need to give a classification. Apart from this disputed and undisputed, we need to classify the disputed as well as undisputed into 3 categories. What is it? Good, significantly increase in credit risk, and credit impaired. What do you mean by credit impaired? Varadu, therinje varadu. So undisputed and credit impaired. So there is no dispute, but the company would have gone for liquidation, a company would have gone for what do you call it as insolvency, and there is 99% haircut. Only 1% will receive. So what is the meaning? Credit impaired. Pochi, mudinji pochi, govinda. So I need to classify them. I have not received the money, but the process says that I will only receive 1%. So I have to classify under credit impaired. Significantly increase in credit risk. So may I request Mr. Muthukumar Rajagopalan to kindly mute. Okay. So significantly increase in credit risk. So that is significantly increase in credit risk, meaning, so over a period of time, their business is not doing well, their cash flows are not, or their checks have been bounced, and they are promising that they will make the payment, but only time has been delayed. So for various reasons. So I am sure this is one place where the disclosure because this is a disclosure the company has to do. And from an audit perspective, from an auditor's perspective, I am sure there will be quite a lot of work. Maybe if it is good, we need to ensure that they don't fall within the bucket of significantly increase in credit risk and credit impact. So this is a place where there will be a lot of jagada between the auditor and the company with respect to classification. And not only with respect to 31/3/22, but with respect to 31/3/21 also for the opening balance. So which will be the starting point, because it's more than 3 years, will have an impact based on how you are classifying 2 to 3 years for your opening balance. Very substantial part. So we need to actually, this year is going to be a turnaround year. This year is going to be a turnaround year, and all of us, now only we have come out of a pandemic situation. Hope pandemic will be over soon. But we have to wait and see. This is with respect to receivables. So maybe if a further question is there from Dhanapal with respect to payable, I
Yeah.
want to make one
Dr.
more.
Raju,
Ah.
yeah. In fact, it's explained by you on the receivables. Now, see if the points coming after your discussion, deliberation, is there any difference, or will the treatment with respect to the payable also similar to the receivables, which you deliberated sometimes back? Or is it the same treatment, how the receivables are treated in the Schedule 3, same way the payables also treated, the same way it is to be followed, or is it differs in any manner? Can you
Good
please
question.
throw
Good
light in this?
question. Now, all this disclosure, it is from a business perspective only, and also statutory perspective. So as far as receivable is concerned, the company is very keen that money has to be received, and the disclosure should not deceive the reader, the various stakeholders, that the receivable means, oh, money will come. So I have to give very clearly, no, risk is there, risk is not there, good. Like that you have to say. And also, mandatorily you have to give that 5 column. So the Panchabhuta vertical you have to give the with respect to receivable. Payable also you have to give the same Panchabhuta vertical. So the 5 vertical you have to give. That means below 6 months, above 6 months is now classified into again the same 4. Now, this is with respect to the vertical. With respect to horizontal, in horizontal, with respect to receivables, it is the undisputed, disputed. Again, undisputed, you have to classify into good, significantly increase in credit risk and credit impair. Disputed also, you have to classify into 3. Good, significantly increase in credit risk and credit impair, and 5 column, that pancha vertical, you have to do it. But with respect to payable, you have to pay. To whom? You have to very clearly say this is continued from the existing Schedule 3. Your existing Schedule 3 says MSME others. This was the category. Now, you have to say MSME others and disputed MSMEs. So, for example, your one of the MSME to whom you have to pay, you have not paid, they have gone to facilitation council. So it is pending in facilitation council. So then you have to, it is not, you don't call it as good or bad. So good or bad classification is only applicable for the receivables, but payable, MSME, others. Now MSME disputed, meaning those MSMEs who have gone to facilitation council, and even if it is, there will be a very interesting question here. Disputed means application has been made. That's all. Even if application has been made and you have received a notice. So that means if you have received a notice before 31st March, before the accounts finalization, my view is you should have received a notice from facilitation council. So then it will come under disputed. So if he has taken the steps to actually file it, gain it, all those I will not call it as disputed. It should be acknowledged, and the company, the entity should have received a notice from MSME asking for a, what you call as a response. So that only I will acknowledge as a disputed dues, either before 31st March or before the accounts are finalized. So that is where this particular classification is very, very significant. Not only this, we need to actually ensure for 31st March 2021 also we do this classification. So over to Dhanapal.
In fact, a very detailed distinction has been given also by between receivable and payables. In fact, I think this really throws very good understanding to each one of us. And now, very importantly, in Schedule 3 amendment, we could see one important change where the title deeds of the immovable property is not held in the name of the company. Then it becomes to now the responsibility of the company to disclose that why the title deed is not standing in the name of the company. Of course, now there's another connected question. Probably after your answer, I will put that question. But particularly on the title deed aspects, as you must be knowing that earlier the auditor was carrying it out based on the fixed assets. As a auditor, such auditor keeps giving report. But now they make it very specific by way of amendment in Schedule 3 the title deeds of the immovable property which is not held in the name of the company. That means it's not throwing the responsibility to the statutory auditor that the moment it is showed in the fixed assets of the balance sheet of the company, financial statement of the company, the land bank, then now it becomes a duty of the auditor, also a duty of the company, to make sure every sale deed, whether it is standing in the name of the company or not. Because earlier that requirement was not there. Therefore, the statutory auditor is not costed upon with the responsibility of ensuring or to make sure whether the title deeds are, whether standing in the name of the company or power of attorney is taken, or is the company is a beneficiary. So that responsibility earlier was not expected from the statutory auditor. Is it that the department or the ministry wanted now to give the responsibility to statutory auditor to make sure that company is disclosing all these aspects of disclosing, keeping the title deed in the name of the company or not? Can you please deliberate on this particular point?
Super, excellent. I will make this point like this. There are people who have raised their hands also. We will take your questions maybe by 6:30 like that. So please reserve your question. Please note down your question. We are there to actually take all your questions. Point number one, Mr. Dhanapal, with respect to title deeds of immovable properties alone. So let us not forget, let us not worry about movable properties. Point number two. So they have made it very clear that other than the property where the company is the lessee and the lease agreements are duly executed in favor of the lessee. So meaning this particular requirement is not applicable for lease requirement, because I will have a long elongated, it will not be in my name. So it is already registered. Now, please understand, over a period of time, and especially large organizations where there are huge assets are there, there will be land banks, and especially government companies, government sectors, public sectors, the state public sector, large land banks will be there. Now, it will be there in the books of accounts. Now, the auditors generally, whenever the title deeds are not produced, they will give one line that the title deeds to certain investments are there in books of accounts, but title deeds could not be verified. They'll say could not be verified. Matter settled there. So there are many investments made by company. That means funds would have gone out and it would have been parked in immovable properties, but ownership is not there in the company's name. So this is and it would have been accounted in the fixed assets. It would have accounted in immovable properties. So property, plant and equipment, immovable properties, land and building. Now here, Schedule 3 and CARO is in sync. So what is Schedule 3 requirement? Schedule 3 says, what is the description of property? Land, building or land and building. Second, you have to give the carrying value as per the books of accounts. Title deeds is in whose name? That you have to give. This disclosure has to be given in Schedule 3 itself. That means it is in books of accounts. In books of accounts, 40 crore is there in land and building, but title is there in not in company name, but in Mr. Ananta Krishnan. Mr. Ananta Krishnan has the title, but the company is AR Constructions Private Limited. So it is in the company, but it is an individual name. And you have to also give whether title deed holder is a promoter, relative, director, or relative of the promoter, director, employee. You have to say that. So somebody else means then you see, is he not a binami, and why such name has been, why in his name that property is held? So all these, it is like opening the skeleton, opening the cupboard, and the skeleton you can see. Property held since which date? So this particular disclosure, who has to give? Schedule 3 has to be given, and in Schedule 3, they have brought a separate item called L. So in the, what do you call it, as the Division 1, Division 2 and Division 3, item number L, this is with respect to balance sheet, additional regulatory information. This is regulatory information where I have to give property held since which date, and I should also give, company has to give reasons for not being held in the name of the company may be disputed, maybe property is not transferred. You have, this is one place where they are very, I will say, a lot of, I think homework has gone inside, and the same information has to be given in CARO. In CARO, para number 31C. 31C also repeats, I repeat the word, repeat the schedule 3. So whether the title deeds, all the immovable properties disclosed in the financial statement are held in the name of the company. If not, you have to give the details. So if not, you have to provide the details. No, what details? Who has to give? In the CARO, I have to give. So what details auditor has to give? Again, description of property, again, gross carrying amount, again, held in whose name, whether promoter or director, period held from what date, reasons. So same information I have to give here. So my observation here is, this is one paragraph where auditor need not give opinion. Auditor only has to get that information from schedule 3 and put it in CARO. Very important. And the second point, during the audit, if it has been found in the books of accounts, certain land and building is there or land bank is there, and the title deed is not, then there will be a jagada between the auditor why this disclosure has not been made, so it has to be brought out. So very, very important. Reconciliation of the investments in immovable properties with respect to title deeds is mandatory. So therefore, they have to take a list and total, what is the book value, what is the document value, what is the total, what is the book value. So naturally, building means depreciated value is the gross carrying value. So it is, they don't ask the WDV, they only ask the gross carrying value. To that extent, the item should be tallied. So very, very interesting amendment change that has been brought out. And I'm sure this is going to change the contours of especially government companies, because government companies is where they will be maximum affected with respect to this, and also private sector where the investments are made, title deeds are not there. Maybe they hold not the title deed, but they have the power of attorney. So they have to say, no, power of attorney is there. Why? So that question and all will open up, and it will be laddu. There is a very good advertisement. Kanna laddu tinga asaya, innoru laddu tinga asaya. So the department, income tax department, for them, this is laddu for them. Okay. Over to Dhanapal.
Yeah. Thank you, Lord. Thanks a lot, Dr. Raju. Now, in your deliberation, you were referring about the value. Now, the important point comes to the mind with respect to the value. Now, if you see the schedule say 3, the reason amendment, earlier there was no mentioning about in schedule 3 the role of registered valuer. Now, in the amendment, we could see the mentioning of registered valuer. Is it going to assure, or is it the expectation of the MCA, but that any evaluation that is provided in the schedule 3 going forward with respect to the land and building or plant and machinery or SFA, security or financial assets, is it going to be the assurance that should be given by a registered valuer by terms of their report, or can be the report or can be a valuation done by the board? Which would be the correct position going forward in the context of the recent amendment in the schedule 3, where it talks about the valuation has to be made by registered valuer if the valuation has to be captured in the financial statement.
Super. I will actually appreciate this particular point very well. We need to understand one thing, Mr. Dhanapal. So, Dr. Dhanapal, I will actually take you to Indian Accounting Standard or Accounting Standard. In Indian Accounting Standard, 38 intangible assets. In Indian Accounting Standard, 40 investment property. Indian Accounting Standard 16 property, plant and equipment. All the 3 are at sync only, where they will say the asset has to be recognized initially at cost. So I buy the property, and maybe it can be anything, even intangible asset. It can be it can even be equipment, it can be machinery, so anything. So I have to recognize in my books of account at cost. Second, subsequent measurement. So during the year 2018, I have actually purchased a land and building for 3 crores. Good. Measure it at 3 crores, recognize at 3 crores. 1 year later, you depreciate building. 2 years later, you depreciate. So third year or fourth year, there is a requirement. Sir, what is this? I bought for 3 crores. Now the after 2 version depreciate panni 2 kodi 1.5 kodi தான் வச்சிருக்கீங்க. என்னது இது? Actual worth of the property is 10 crore or 12 crore. It is 1.5. My balance sheet is very what do you call it as it is not it doesn't show the fair value or the market value. So there Indian accounting standard gives you a model. What is a model? For subsequent measurement, you can either follow cost model or revaluation model. Good. Revaluation means what is fair value, what is your market value. So 1.5 crore, the market value is actually 10 crore or 15 crore. You can recognize 15 crore in your books of accounts, and then you can even depreciate further years at 15 crores on that, you can depreciate. Point to be noted. This is applicable for property, plant, equipment, land, except land, building. It is also applicable for intangible asset. It is even applicable for investment property. So India is 40, India is 38, India is 16. Recognizes this. But in India, who has to do revaluation as in mentioned? So that means management can do revaluation. Management can engage any corporate, any individual, or themselves they can do the valuation. And it is convinced, and that is where one place where there will be jagada between auditors and management. Point. Second point. Now, first time they have not amending Ind AS, but through Schedule 3. Through Schedule 3, they made one thing very clear, that if at all, so they say company shall disclose as to whether the property, plant and equipment, whether revaluation is based on valuation by registered valuer. So Ind AS doesn't prescribe a registered valuer, but Schedule 3 indirectly says registered valuer only has to do. This is to be kindly noted. Now, Schedule 3 only says, Schedule 3 only, the management has to only say, 1.45 crore property, I have revalued at 15 crore with the help of registered valuer, I have done. That's all. This is what Schedule 3 should say. But auditor, what he has to say? Caro very clearly mentions one point, that whether the company has revalued its property, plant and equipment or intangible assets, and if so, whether the revaluation is based on valuation by registered valuer, up to that is Schedule 3. After that, Caro says, specify the amount of change. Caro says this. That means auditor has to comment. But I need not comment. The company need not comment this. Company only will say, I have taken the valuation report on registered valuer, matter over, settled. 1.5 crore, I have actually enhanced to 15 crore. So 13.5 crore debit to my asset and credit to my revaluation reserve. I would have done that. So my balance sheet has swelled. It has actually ballooned. But they say, specify the amount of change. If change is 10% or more in the aggregate of the net carrying value of the each class. So what is 1.5 crore? On that 10% is how much? 15 lakhs. So 1.5 crore plus 15 lakhs is 1 crore and 65 lakhs. So it is more than 1.1 crore and 65. It is 15 crore. So then I have to specify the amount of change because it is more than 10%, and I have to classify for each class of property, plant, equipment, intangible asset. So this is first time. So they have actually, so they have cast a responsibility on the auditors. Caro, first time. So it is very, very interesting, Dr. Dhanapal.
Really wonderful point, sir. In fact, happy to note, being a registered valuer, the scope for the registered valuer, very decently enhanced and when professional work for the register valuer, also apart from Companies Act 12 sections and IBC and SEBI few sections. Now, through this Schedule 3 recognizing the register valuers, that should be appreciated. Before taking the next question, I request all the members, I'm happy to announce that today, in fact, we have around 260 members registered for this program. This is the first time, all-time record for our study circle, sir. No doubt, it's a very happy that almost all we are touching to 100 now. So people to be joined, still people are still joining it. And before taking Raju sir, next question by from Dhanpal sir, I have a questions in Schedule 3 related to loan to directors and promoters, KMP related party related issues. What is the significant in Schedule 3 talking about this related particular topic, sir?
Good question. See, this is, I will say, a very, very important change they have brought. I will call this as PDKR. So we have so many, what do you call a political party. So here, Schedule 3, you can consider this as one very important party. So PDKR. PDKR means P means promoter, D means director, K means key managerial personnel as per section 251 of the Companies Act. Related party R. This is as per 272 of the Companies Act, 2 within bracket 72. Very important. Now, what the Schedule 3 says, what the CARO says. So this is very significant. Of course, Ind AS 24. Ind AS 24 mandates related party disclosures is mandatory. And they say you need to mention who is the related party, and you should also mention what are the transactions, summary, and you should also give the outstanding balances on the related party. Now here they have mentioned that disclosure shall be made where advances is granted to promoter, to director, to key managerial person and related party. Very important, repayable on demand. So that means anytime you can ask for, or without specifying any terms or period of repayment. So you have to very clearly say, you have to give the classification. So I have given 43 crores. Out of 43 crores, 22 crores is repayable on demand. 21 crores, I have not given any condition. So no vaddi giddi, nothing. I have given this money. Now I need to mention how much I have given to promoter in value, how much I have given to directors in value, how much I have given to key managerial person in value, and to related parties in value, and the percentage I have to give. Now, you will be surprised, this story doesn't end with Schedule 3. In CARO, if you go, the story still unfurls. The story still unfurls. Oh my God. So, what your Schedule 3, I mean, what your CARO says is, in CARO, they make this point a little detail. So there they say, whether during the year the company has made investments or provided guarantee or security or granted any loan or advances. Now please, there it is only with respect to the loans or advances. So here they have also included guarantee. So in the nature of loan, secured or unsecured, to companies, firms, LLPs or any other parties. And you should appreciate one thing, they have mentioned that whether the aggregate of the amount, what is the outstanding balance with respect to SJVA. That means subsidiaries, joint venture and associates. So that will come under related party. And they have also mentioned other than SJVA. Who are other than SJVA? The other than SJVA will be your related party, key managerial personnel and director. So your audit report has to give a little more clarity. So Schedule 3 gives one dabba with percentage, but your CARO goes a little deeper. And you will be much surprised. There is one more aspect they are asking for, which I just want to share with you. that that particular aspect is whether, sorry, 1 minute. So this will be actually with respect to 3. Ek minute. Yes. So here there is one more aspect they have covered, and that aspect is whether the company has granted any loans or advances in the nature of loans either repayable on demand or without specifying any terms or payment or repayment. So this is what the Schedule 3 says. So that information I have to again capture. What is the total loans granted, aggregate amount of loans granted to promoters, related parties. So what is given there, I have to give, once again, I have to repeat here. Second, I should also give the classification with respect to SJVA and others. So that classification also I have to give. So very, very important. And apart from that, there is one more requirement that they have given. In respect of loans and advances in the nature of loans, whether the schedule of repayment of principal and interest has been stipulated and whether the repayments are regular. So you have to say it is regular and irregular. So not only giving money and then their promise is given. So it is regular or irregular. Number 2, if the amount is irregular, that means overdue. Then what is the amount of overdue more than 90 days? Number 1. Number 2, whether any steps are taken by the company. So first you have to say whether schedule of repayment are regular. If it is irregular, more than 90 days, what is the amount? Whether steps are taken. To this extent, auditor have to comment. So this is much detail. So their disclosure alone. But here, with respect to, so auditors, we need to do documentation. We need to ask questions. We need to get information. We need to find out what is the ledger statement speaks about. What is the agreement? Sometimes there may not be any agreement. If there is no agreement, then we have to conclude that this particular loan has been given without specifying any terms or period of repayment. So that will not come under the principal and interest and 90 days category. That will come under the F category, whether without specifying any terms. So specifying terms, regular or irregular. Not specifying terms, put the amount fully. This is the total amount. So very, very important. So what is given there in Schedule 3, you have to now capture it in detail.
Very nicely explained, sir. Really nice, sir. So not only promoters, this thing really for associates as well as joint ventures and subsidiaries, disclosure requirement and important point is covered. Before taking the next question, I request all the participants, now almost all 103 participants, highest number ever number in our study circle, sir. Glad to say. And I request all the members kindly register your attendance, name as well as your membership number. Kindly capture in the chat box. Don't miss it. And your attendance will be captured only through chat box. Write your name as well as your membership number to capture the register as a token of your attendance. So, Sir Raju sir, I have one more question before Dhanpal sir asking one more this thing. Is there anything related to undisclosed income talking in the Schedule 3, sir, and the latest amendments?
Yeah. Now I need to explain one thing here. So far, what we have been discussing, these are all balance sheet items. Now, this is with respect to a P&L item. Now, undisclosed income, we need to be very clear about this particular point. Both in CARO as well as in Schedule 3, it has been captured. This particular aspect is captured. Now I have to give a backdrop for this. See, especially under Income Tax Act, say there is a company where scrutiny or some Arun Kumar, may I request you to kindly. Now, say post scrutiny or post any other proceedings, there are undisclosed income which is offered, and maybe we can say voluntarily surrendered, or during the proceedings an addition has been made, okay, and on the tax has been paid. now, how to account this? So this is a very important aspect. So I just want to share with you what is the position with respect to the Schedule 3 part. In Schedule 3, they have mentioned that the company must give details of transactions not recorded in books of accounts that have been surrendered. So I have to give a separate paragraph. So for example, 4 crores have been offered as an addition. On 4 crores, you have paid tax. Of course, tax paid will come under the tax paid because you have to only pay tax from your books of accounts. But the 4 crores that has been offered, nowhere it is captured anywhere. So now they have made this point very clear. The company shall give details of any transaction not recorded in books of accounts that are surrendered or disclosed during the year in the tax assessment under the income tax. So there you have to say very clearly, during the year you have offered and you have got an assessment order. Say for the year 21-22, you have offered 4 crores and you have paid tax, which will belong to maybe 3 or 4 years back. But this year only we have offered that particular income. It can be due to search, due to survey, or due to scrutiny, whatever it is. So unless there is immunity for disclosure under any scheme, the company shall also state whether the previously unrecorded income and related assets have been properly recorded in the books of accounts during the year. What do you mean by that? So if at all there is any undisclosed income during the process, during the proceeding, if it has been offered, so has been surrendered or disclosed as income during the year in the tax assessments. So that is most important. That means it will belong to some year. But during the year you have offered, then you shall state whether the previously unrecorded income and related assets have been properly recorded in books of accounts during the year. For example, you have there is a asset which is unrecorded asset. Unrecorded asset has been made an addition. It may belong to a land. So there is a land bank which has been identified that this particular 5 acre, it is in the name of the company. You have not brought in books of accounts. So you say, okay, whatever may be the fair value as on today's assessment, I'm ready to pay tax. Now, how will you bring into books of accounts? So there you need to previously recorded income and related asset have been properly recorded in books of account. So you need to bring it. So you need to record that asset and then you have to record that in your other comprehensive income. So credit other comprehensive and debit your asset and then say and give a note. It's very clearly that this has been recorded and tax has been paid accordingly. So if tax is paid, the related asset has to be recorded in books of accounts. So this is very, very crucial and critical. Maybe many of the private limited companies, so they will come under this. And let us understand one thing that so far, this can also be a separate CPE program. What is it? How the additions made in the income tax assessments. So jewelry additions, so expenditures to the extent, because expenditures alone, if it is additions are made, no, I will not allow this expenditure. How you will account it? Please understand. So if expenditure has been disallowed, you cannot bring this as an addition. But if it is income, if it is offered, okay, additional income offered because cash has been found out or asset has been found out, then that has to be brought in books of accounts. If it is, what do you call it as expenditure? For example, there is 50 lakhs expenditure. They also know you have spent 50 lakhs, but I will not allow, there is no business expenditure. I will only allow 20 lakhs. Then 30 lakhs is disallowed. Disallowed expenditure, can I bring in books of accounts? No, you can't bring it. You can only pay tax for it. So that need not be recorded. That you need not mention it. But with respect to unrecorded income and unrelated assets, it has to be brought into books of accounts. This is very crucial.
Really fantastic, sir. Crystal clear about the entire topic. You rightly said that private limited companies are having a lot of issues related to undisclosed income. So you have clearly explained how to disclose as well as not only for income tax purpose and by giving an example, live example with income tax, if anything, disclosed earlier and disclosed now. So all circumstances, live examples you're rightly given. Thank you very much friends, for giving for joining with us for the members other than Anna Nagar CP Study Circle. Now we almost all reach 108. Once again, I request members who are attendance will be captured based on your name as well as a membership number in the chat box. So it will be recorded only through this. Until completing the session, the attendance will be taken into consideration. I request moderator Palsa to take it.
Yeah, Dr. Raju, I think you nicely explained the various aspects of the Schedule 3, but I'm coming to the basics again. I think Schedule 3 is it segregates applicability of Schedule 3 for India's company and companies to whom India is not applicable. So is it a difference between both these companies in following the Schedule 3 requirement? Can you please throw your points on that?
Actually, if you look at the Schedule 3 format, which was originally brought out after Companies Act 2013 was made applicable, they have brought out 3 divisions of Schedule 3. Originally, only 2 division was there. That is Schedule Division 1 and Division 2. Division 1 is applicable for accounting standard. So those companies to whom accounting standard is applicable, and for those companies to whom Indian accounting standard is applicable. So corporates to whom Indian accounting standards are applicable, Division 2, the Schedule 3 applicability, 99% the inputs will be almost the same, except for a few items. Like for example, in Division 2, they have brought out a new format with respect to other equity, because there was no detailed description with respect to other equity. So there used to be a format which was developed by the listed entities based on the prescription of the Indian accounting standard, and one company followed, the other company also followed the suit with respect to disclosure of the other, what do you call it as the equity share capital, balance at the beginning, change in equity, and then change in equity, what are all the breakups you have to give. Any listed company you take, the other comprehensive income or the change in equity, they'll give the breakup as what are the changes with respect to revaluation surplus, what are the changes with respect to exchange differences, money received against share warrants. Like that, there will be various categories. This was based on the prescription of India, yes, but the Schedule 3 format was not there. So now they have brought this format in Division 2. So if you look at Division 1 and Division 2, this will be the major change. Apart from that, the loans and advances with respect to receivables, payables, title deeds, all these, both in Division 1 and Division 2, the same disclosure is there. So there is no difference.
Yeah. See, now in Schedule 3, in the recent amendments, when we see the amendments made in Schedule 3, we could come across a concept called cryptocurrency. So I think it is gaining more attention now. I think particularly as a auditor, a statutory auditor, now it becomes all the more responsible to also see these kind of transaction and investment in cryptocurrency. Can you please throw some light on what is that cryptocurrency and what is virtual currency, and what is the requirement with respect to financial reporting as well as auditing reporting? Over to you.
Okay, so good. Now, point number 1, let me give an example. See, this cryptocurrency, otherwise called virtual currency. This is not a currency of any government. It is a virtual currency, means it is in bits. That is why they call it as Bitcoin. So you can't see anything in soft format, you cannot see. So only thing is, from your bank account, money will vanish, and in some other account, a statement will come that you have got a Bitcoin. So this is the only. So that means your bank account will go and you will get something in credit. So it is like children's will used to play Ludo games. What is Ludo games? Means Ludhiana, they will give 25,000 and they'll buy Ludhiana, and they'll give 40,000, they'll buy Calcutta, like that. So very similar is your virtual currency. Reserve Bank of India has brought out two circulars, very important circular. Number one circular, which was brought out, we are now in 2021. They brought the circular one on 2017 and another circular on 2019. What is 2017 circular? This 2017 circular, they made it very clear that Reserve Bank of India nowhere responsible for virtual currency transaction. So that means at the individual's risk, you have to deal with virtual currency. This was the circular given in 2017. In 2019 end, Reserve Bank of India gave one more circular to all the banks. What is it? None of the banks which is regulated by Reserve Bank of India, foreign banks, private banks, public sector banks, regional rural banks, cooperative banks, they are not supposed to deal with the virtual currency. They should not deal. Now, if at all a customer is asking, I want to transfer money from one account to another, you transfer. But you cannot have a arrangement with any of the virtual currency brokers with respect to holding a account in your business transaction. So they have banned, I repeat the word, RBI has banned banks to deal with the virtual currencies. So circular number one, they said at your risk you have to do it. Circular number two, they regulate the banks not to deal with it. That means if I am an individual, I have money, 10 lakhs, I will give an instruction to my bank, please transfer 10 lakhs to this particular account. That guy will receive 10 lakh rupees and he will transfer to me bits. So that is nothing but another a blockchain account. I will have a blockchain account. In that, he will transfer bits. That's all. So various types of Bitcoins. In Bitcoins, various avatars are there. So this is purely a cartel of organization, association across the globe. So point number one to be noted. Point number two. That means the corporates, can they deal with cryptocurrency, virtual currency on their own? Yes, they can do. Now, if you deal with cryptocurrency, you will end up in profit. You may end up in loss. You may have a closing balance. Now, there is an accounting question I will put. This is also a very interesting accounting standard question. I had a 40 lakhs bank balance. Out of 40 lakh bank balance, I have converted 38 lakhs I have converted into cryptocurrency or virtual currency. Now, the virtual currency in terms of Ethereum, I have Ethereum in terms of that Bitcoin, we call it Ethereum. So one Ethereum I have in 38 lakhs. Now, whether that 38 lakhs Ethereum will I classify as my cash balance and bank balance, or will I show at investments? Even today, we don't have an answer. Even today, we don't have an answer for this question. Maybe you can classify it. My view is it is an investment. My view is it is an investment. It is a financial asset. It is subject to 100% risk. And it is subject to 100% risk. Point number one. Point number two, now the Schedule 3 has brought one requirement. What is it? Whether the company has traded or invested in cryptocurrency or virtual currency during the year, yes or no, you have to say. And if yes, you have to disclose what is the profit you have made on it or loss you have made on it, consolidated. Second, what is the currency closing balance you are holding it? You have to mention that. Three, very, very important. Very, very important. People, they do trading in Bitcoin, not using their money. They will borrow money from Dhanapal, I will take 5 lakhs. From Hemant Kumar, I will take 5 lakhs. From S. Balasubramaniam, I will take 5 lakhs. Sushant Chowdhury, I will take 5 lakhs. Total 20 lakhs, bring into company. That money I will actually invest in Bitcoin. Very important. Then deposits or advances from any person for the purpose of trading or investing in cryptocurrency or virtual currency, how much deposit I have received, from whom I have received. I have to mention that dabba. So that disclosure I have to make, which is very, very critical, very critical.
Wow. So I think still certain areas looks like a myth in cryptocurrency or virtual currency, whatever we call it. So since I think department has to come out to the more clarity with respect to investment in cryptocurrency. First of all, whether it is an investment or can it be treated equivalent to the cash? I think probably department may have to come and clarify it, so to avoid unnecessary confusion in future. Now, seeing the recent changes in the Schedule 3, I just want to put one point. Probably I can say this is not a direct uh, requirement of the MCA, but as a company secretary, as a registered valuer, I myself, this particular point keep triggering in my mind. See, now with the recent amendment in Schedule 3, they made it clear that land and building or whatever the property, it should be supported by the valuation by the registered valuer. First of all, earlier it was open because as you were referring that valuation made by the board itself is sufficient for the purpose of in the AS, because it is the valuation, in-house valuation done by the board. Based on that, they fix a value. That means they based on that they mention the value, specify the value in the financial statements. But now, since the department, the ministry is very specific on the point that the value has to be supported by the valuation of the register value. My question comes like now, in fact, it's to my own understanding, rather it will benefit other participants also. See, now, earlier there was no that understanding where we have a different register valuer called SFA valuer, plant and machinery valuer, land and building valuer. Now, earlier, if a statutory auditor, if he is auditing an accounts and gives his report, right? And when he audit and gives his report, whether you call it as a financial reporting or audit reporting, whatever it may be, subject to complying all the requirements of auditing standard and accounting standard. But still, earlier there was a vacuum, meaning that the auditor was not sure, the statutory auditor was not sure the exact value of the property that is involved. But fortunately or unfortunately, the investor, by seeing the balance sheet with the presumption hope that the audit, it has been audited by the professional called CA and other, if it is a secretarial audit by CAs or cost audit by CMA. So the investor, reposing the confidence of the audit of the professionals, they invested the money into the company shares and they repose the confidence on the. Now my question is that earlier there was no requirement, so there was no requirement to have a valuation report backing for a statutory auditor to come out his own report. Now, since it is clear specification is coming out from the ministry by way of amendment in Schedule 3, that any value of the plant and machine, land and building should be supported by the register valuer. Can a statutory auditor, or as a statutory auditor, will you be insisting before giving any statutory audit report of any company for this matter, which has got a land bank or which has got a factory, which has got a land and building and factory together, will insist the valuation
I think that there is a.
I will request
Raju sir can answer this.
May I
to
request
provide
Anappa
your
to kindly, yeah, you are now only it is clear. Please
Yeah,
go
yeah.
ahead.
I think
Can you
Raju
repeat
sir
the
can
question?
answer this.
Yeah. So I think I just wanted Dr. Raju's view on that point, whether going forward, will it be a precautionary measure, whatever you call it, or will it be a directory or mandatory on part of the statutory auditor to in valuation report of.
Hope the question is clear. Yeah.
Now, what is the question? I am not able to get it.
Sir,
Can you
simple.
repeat it?
I'll put like this. So in future, before issuing
Your views, Dr.
before
Raju.
issuing a statutory auditor report on the commenting on the financial statement, whether what are the precautions a statutory has to take? You can say like this: what are the precautions? Is it a precaution or mandatory that a valuation report should be taken for wherever balance sheet having land and building and plant and machinery or other SFA also?
A very interesting question. So far, there was no requirement. If I have to do window dressing of my balance sheet, let me be very crude. Okay. So I have a land bank of say 50 acre. The original cost was only 4 crores. Now after 5 years, the land bank is not 4 crores, it is actually 80 crores. So he will say, no, what is this? My balance sheet is so very, but I'm worth 80 crores. My valuation is not that much. So I want 80 crores. So accounting standard permits you to revalue it and then enhance your book value, and auditor will certify it. But now, if you don't do revaluation, auditor will certify. If you do revaluation, auditor will insist on a valuation report as on the date of revaluation. You can do revaluation on 31st March or any day before 31st March from 1st of April. So you do the revaluation, but I will insist on the valuation report, and that too from a registered valuer. So you do all the revaluations of all the property, plant and equipment, intangible assets and investment property. I agree, but I want the valuation report of a registered valuer of IBPA. So this is a mandatory requirement.
Sir, one more question from my side related to this. While finalizing the financial statements, in the view of insolvency and bankruptcy code, what sort of precautionary measures from the management point of view as well as auditor point of view to be taken care in the financial statements and audit reports? Sir?
Very good question. I'll give two important points here. Point number one, you have taken working capital loan. Okay. So when you have taken a working capital loan, the provision very clearly says what it says. Let me just share with you the very important point with respect to Schedule 3. In Schedule 3, they say where the company has borrowings from banks or financial institutions on the basis of security of current assets. So that means working capital loan. So if you have a working capital loan, company shall disclose. What the company shall disclose? Whether quarterly return or statements of current assets filed by the company are in agreement with books of accounts. That means stock statement, let us take. So the quarterly stock statement and your quarterly books of accounts, whether does it match it? No, sometime what will happen? Your 30th June stock will be there, but you will give the stock statement only on say 18th of July. So that means there will be on 18th of July, stock will be different. 30th June stock will be different, but 30th June only you will have you would have measured, maybe you would have done the periodical stock verification or management report like that. Now, if you do like that, then what you have to do is, if not the summary of reconciliation and reasons of material discrepancies have to be adequately disclosed. Now, who has to do this? The company has to disclose. So this is point number one. So this has to be taken care. Second, with respect to the CARO audit report, I need to mention one thing here. In CARO item number 9, they have made this point very clear. It was not there previously, but now they have brought this. What is it they have brought? You have to give a dabba. What is it? Whether the company has defaulted in repayment of loan. Please, this is what your question is. If the defaulted in loan means, as on 31st March, there should be overdue and payable. That means due and payable. So then only due, payable and defaulted. Then only you have this particular para will be attracted. So whether the company has defaulted in repayment of loan or in payment of interest. So principal or interest. And if yes, no, what do you have to do? You have to give the period, the amount of default to be reported as per a format. This is actually 6-column format. What is the 6th column? First column, you have to give the nature of borrowing. It can be long-term or a short-term. That means the requirement what I gave here is only for working capital, but here you have to give for both long-term and short-term. Okay. Second, who is the name of the lender? Third column, amount not paid on due date. Number 3, whether it is principal or interest. And how many number of days it delayed or unpaid from the due date till 31st March. And the 6th column, auditor's remarks. You can say due to that, due to COVID, due to, you can give any remarks. I think this is, I'm seeing this for the first time, this particular dabba has to be given. So it's very, very serious point. And maybe your point is noted here, that if at all this information is there, I think this is actually a primer. So this is a teaser also, we can say, that is an information that the company is going towards an insolvency state.
You're right, sir. So question of red flag to the bankers and the stakeholders. of the-
So if at all the what do you say, auditors give nil values here, I think this will become very serious in the days to come. So this is one thing. There will be a lot of pressure between the company as well as the auditor, and maybe many change of auditors also can happen. And this is one place where I request all the fraternity, all the professional fraternity to be united. So wherever there is a change of auditors, please talk to the previous auditor, find out, especially this year and next year, these things will happen. 31st March 2022, this is going to be very serious, because the moment you put this, the lender name is also there, and he cannot go to any other lender. So all these aspects are there, very, very serious point. All these days it was not there. You are not opening this. It was only ilai maraivu kai maraiva irundhathu. Ippo வெளிச்சம் போட்டு காமிக்கணும்.
So days may come that one point of stage, auditors may require to see the civil report of the client and report in our audit report. So days may come.
இனிமே ஆடிட் ரிப்போர்ட்டை பார்த்தாலே போறோம், கதை எல்லாம் தெரிஞ்சிடும். So
Sir,
it is
in the case of audit report, like in the case of valuation report or any other forensic reports, we used to give habit to give that caveats, limitation, disclaimers. So those type of things, whether in audit report, Caro report, whether we can issue.
No. You cannot give. Maybe if you give a disclaimer in your report, you have to say very clearly why disclaimer you have to give. You have a separate prescription by institute for giving a disclaimer audit report, because you have not been provided appropriate information, or you are not able to give an opinion. You are not able to come out with an opinion for various reasons. So you need to actually find out what do you call it as concrete evidences why you are not able to come out with an opinion. Maybe non-cooperation or non-available information, time is not there, some serious transaction happened which you don't want to be party to it, something. Okay.
So, before taking Dhanpal sir, next question, I request the members also time for us to ask question and interact with our eminent speaker. Kindly raise your hand so that will allow you to unmute and speak. So
It's almost 6:30, so I think it's
so
nice
I request yeah, I will complete, sir, a few questions only. So any member interested to speak with the speaker, kindly unmute and speak, and we'll give a chance. So I request Dhanpal sir to continue.
Dr. Raju, as you were explaining about disclaimer, I remember SA 700, 705, 706, I think all this deliberates on how the audit report should be. But with respect to our Hemant ji question on a disclaimer, caveat, everything, I think nowadays we could see few reports, more than they are reporting, their caveats run to so many pages. I don't think that is really going to protect them at all, because at the end of the day, as a professional, the responsibility is casted upon us to report whatever is expected from the professional in the form of a report. So it becomes a duty of the professional to make sure that he is reporting based on the record that he ought to have seen. Suppose if he has not seen the record, it is his duty to say that he has not seen the records and say that he is not in a position to comment on it. So I don't think, I'm not coming to the valuation report because there's a separate valuation standard about caveat, limitations, all that. I'm not touching upon the valuation report limitation caveats. I'm talking about general reports caveats, which how far it is valid. So it all the more it is a responsibility of the professional to justify and to prove that he is right on his part. Just because of caveat and limitation, that he cannot wash off his hand, or that will not.
I completely agree, sir. We can't escape from liability, professional liability. We have to do our
Exactly.
due diligence, and we have to be more whatever
Yeah.
standards, code of conduct we have within the parameters we have to do.
Probably before concluding, if any participant want to raise, they can raise. Otherwise, I will, one important point, which probably we need our Dr. Raju's view on that. See, earlier we were deliberating about the property not held in the name of the company. Then subsequently, the same reason amendment in Schedule 3, now it talks about the details of Binami property held also should be provided. In fact, it says the proceeding, if it is initiated or pending in the company for holding any Binami property, that also should be reported. The company shall disclose that such a property, details of the such property and amount involved and who is the beneficiary. And if the property is not in the books, then where it is, then who has paid the consideration. I wanted to check with Dr. Raju whether is it deferred from the earlier requirement of disclosure of property not held in the name of the company, and or is it supplement each other? And now the responsibility becoming more to the company disclosing, and again the responsibility of statutory auditor also becoming more to make sure that company is disclosing it, or if they are not disclosing it, to report that the company is not disclosing. I thought Dr. Raju can throw light on this so that participants will get benefit out of it.
Okay, so first point, what I want to clear here is this will, along with the disclosure with respect to title deeds on immovable property, the next immediate paragraph is the auditor has to comment whether any proceedings have been initiated. That means under the Binami transactions, the Prohibition of Binami Property Transaction Act. So PBBT. So Prohibition of Binami Property Transaction Act. So there, section 24 of the act, there will be a notice that will be issued. That is a show cause notice. So that is the starting point. We will have 24 months actually to that proceedings can actually go, and after that an order has to be passed, and that can also go for tribunal. You can contest against that. So the total time available for the entire proceedings to happen will be 4 years. So point to be noted here, if a notice has been issued, immediately the property will, the what do you call it as the maligned property or the property which is accused that this is accumulated due to Binami transactions. So those property will be actually will be freezed so that nothing can be done with respect to that. So here we need to disclose. So the proceedings will be going on between the company and the department, and the property would have been freezed. But my books of accounts, my financial report, my audit report will never speak anything about it. Maybe out of, and even I may not disclose it to the auditor that there is a proceeding going on with respect to Binami property transaction. Now that means the company is a Binami. I have got money from somebody else and the property is in the name of the company, but the source is not company source. It belongs to somebody else, and it is under investigation. So whether any proceeding has been initiated or pending against the company for holding any Binami property. So that means company is holding any Binami property of somebody else. So the money has been routed through the company and property has been held and notice is issued. So if notice is issued, then I have to say that means it is a indication that those properties are already freezed, and until the proceedings are over, it will not be unfreezed. So those properties are is already encumbered to Government of India. So Binami property transaction is like Trishul. There will be 3 attacks will be there. Number 1, property will be freezed. Number 2, there will be a penalty. Number 3, there will be a prosecution also. Penalty will be there, prosecution will be there, property also gone. So to that extent, so that the law is very, very, I will call it as not a civil law, it is a criminal law. So the people who are managing the affairs of the company and the respective assets, everything will be will go for a toss. So that is the seriousness of this particular provision. So unless another there is a proceeding, this will be not applicable.
I request Madhu
Sir,
Desikan, sir, to take a question, sir.
Sir, good evening, sir. Good evening to all of you. See, my question is, now, sometime back you talked about PPE. PPE, wherein you have to get the valuation done and all that. You have said that. Now, suppose if I have that land as my inventory, suppose if I'm a realty promoter or I sell the plots. Okay. Now, do I have to still mention all the details, like what is mentioned in the for the PPE, land and buildings? That is my question.
Sir, it is a very interesting question. So let me make this point very clear. This particular aspect is only applicable. The company shall provide details of all immovable property whose title deeds are not held in the name of the company in format given below. And here they very clearly mentioned where such immovable property is jointly held with others. Details are required to be given. So here the relevant line item is property, plant and equipment, investment property, and those that has been retired from active use for disposal. That means investment property. I'm sorry, the retired from active use, that means ready for disposal. So you have to only classify under this, not for an inventory. When you are holding it for inventory, it will not come under this. Maybe you will hold it for various business reasons. So there is no necessity that you have to, the title should be in the name of the company. You may be an aggregator, you may be a facilitator.
Exactly.
So all these models are there. So the Schedule 3 doesn't go into that model. Schedule 3 is only concerned about your fixed investments. The property belong to the company and the title deed should be there. So not with respect to your business assets.
Oh, okay. That is my understanding. Good. Thanks.
Thank you.
And then other. Can I ask one more question?
Please,
If
please.
time
Sir,
permits?
Madhu Desikanji, நீங்க உங்களுடைய கொஞ்சம் introduction கொடுங்க so that others also we will know about you.
I'm Madhu Desikan. I'm also an insolvency professional, and I've been in practice. I mean, I qualified in 1989, and then in practice from 2017 onwards.
Super ji.
That's
Sir
my
is an active member in our study circle, sir. Sir is very active and knowledgeable member in our study circle.
So nice. So
Go
nice.
ahead, sir.
No.
Go ahead.
No, SEZ property. Suppose if I am promoting SEZ. Okay. Now the point is, do I still have to give all the details? If I'm this thing, I'm talking about the land. So I'm promoting an SEZ. Hello.
Yeah, I got it.
So what I'm promoting it. I have developed that place. Now, do I have to give all the details? Sometimes some parts of the land, some patches may not belong to me, but I will still hold it as a kind of how do I
Sir,
put it?
you are a SEZ developer, am I right?
Yes, I am also having an SEZ, which is incidentally part of my Okay, yes, okay, I'm an SEZ developer, right?
Yeah. Sir, very
Right.
good. So you are a SEZ developer. So go ahead, sir. So main question, crux of the question you were saying.
Thing is, suppose land has to be contiguous. So some part of land I may not have the title as yet, or they would have given me a power of attorney to do whatever I want. But SEZ, land has to be
The point
contiguous.
is, for that particular portion of the
Yes.
land,
Yes.
have you made any consideration? Have you paid any
Yeah,
consideration?
I paid consideration. I've got it, but still not got to save position for the short term short-term cash flow purpose. I'm not registered in my name because for simple reason I want to save on stamp duty. Because I am slightly short of cash.
So agreed, sir. So this is where it will come here, because you have to give reasons. So maybe you can give business reasons. You can say once the development is over, or till I get a new party, or you can say that is as per the agreement, I need to hold it for so many years, or you can even say capital is insufficient. Once the capital is there, then the property will be registered.
Exactly.
So this place where you need to actually think about what is the real reason. So the real reason, if you record it there, I think that will be sufficient, rather than thinking about artificial reasons.
Okay, okay. Good.
you very
Point
much.
is point taken. Point taken. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I request
good.
our deputy convener, sir, Bashikar, sir, to
I have a small question in this.
please open your video, sir. We want to see you.
I think it will slow down. That's why.
No problem. No problem. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. See, there's related to this point. The in the case explained, it is for investment for sale. No, it is not for property. No. So will the rule apply? The
Sir,
property.
I'm not clear with your question, sir. What is
No,
it?
no. In the case, in the point is talked about, the land bank is not for the company's holding. It's only current asset, right?
Yeah, the current asset, it is not applicable.
Yeah, that's why. So the question of that title deed being there, I am not very sure. It applies to a company which is developing land or developing building properties. Is that right?
Generally, sir, SC is a developer. They may not transfer the property.
Correct.
They will be the owner forever. They will develop the property. They will only give the property on lease for some years to the respective user. So they will not sell the property. So that is how the SEZ concept will work.
Concept, right.
Dr. Raju, shall I add something
Please,
to supplement your point?
Yeah.
See, the point which we are discussing on SEZ, actually, see, my understanding on the Schedule 3 amendment with respect to property not held, it talks about the ownership of the company. It does not talk about the business of the company. Please understand, because I have a few SEZ clients as my clientele basis. See, SEZ developer is a business. Okay, but what the Schedule 3 requirement, what the Schedule 3 expects reporting is that the ownership of the company, because they want to identify the real owner. They want that's how the Benami property, all that can be implemented, means enforced when you are able to identify the owner. So the Schedule 3 requirement is that the company there are situations where company pays money, property is not bought in the name of the company. That's a scenario one. The scenario two, where the company does not pay money, but the title loan comes in the name of the company. So here, it only focuses on the fixed assets of the company and the land bank of the company held by the company as its assets by having the ownership of the company. So what we are discussing about SEZ is a business. SEZ is nothing but developer. SEZ developer is nothing but he will be developing the complex and he will be renting out. He will be leasing out to other software companies to make sure that they are getting the benefits of the SEZ. Here, as we were discussing earlier, it is like a stock in trade. Probably the question which was raised before Mr. Madhu, I believe that till the entire thing is completed, anyway, there's a concept of capital work in progress. Any project, because I also come across certain balance sheets where I keep seeing certain balance sheet where 3-4 years they are showing only capital in progress, because they are saying that the project is not completed. When the project is completed, you can see in our Taramani Road, the entire area is SEZ developing area only. Tidal Park, all that they are developing the SEZ and they are renting it out, leasing it out to the software developers. So the idea is that takes 3-4 years for them to complete the development. Till then time, they'll be showing as a capital work in progress. Probably stock in trade, whatever the requirement, accounting requirement, reporting requirement. But here the Schedule 3, what it wants is different. It wants to identify the asset base and land bank of the company, not on the business of the company. That's how I understand the difference between the both, dealing with the land as a owner, dealing with the land and building as a business. I hope I'm making it clear. Certain.
Thank you, sir. Level. Very nicely explained. Hope we are really delighted to have first time crossing in recent past 100+ members participant. So we are really educated and enlightened with the different topics with the Schedule 3, and we talked about non-corporate, corporate, applicable type of accounting standards, all these enlightened knowledge. Thank you very much, Dr. Raju sir, as well as Mr. Dhanpal sir. I know that you are not available in office, but still taking time and you're taking your time and given to us. This is the time for us formally. I request Bashikar, Deputy Convener, sir, to give a vote of thanks to the both speakers and moderator. Over to Bashikar, sir.
It has been a wonderful session where two of the experts in their own fields have enlightened us with a lot of practical aspects of the amendments. It is not purely academic, but it was studied with a lot of illustrations and their own practical experience. And it was a wonderful session. I mean, I must congratulate both of them for their excellent contribution today. I mean, I agree. I hope that all the participants today will agree with my assessment and endorse my views. Thanks once again for your valuable contributions. I mean, it will help us a lot in our jobs.
Thank you very much, and once again, thank you very much, the speakers and participants. More than that, my as usual, my own CP service members. We have a guest of other members from the different organizations from across India. Thank you very much for joining with our study circle. Thank you very much. Have a nice time. Good day.
Thank you, Bashikar sir. Thank you, Hemant ji.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raju.